Dog refuses to leave baby alone. Parents discover why and call the police. A restless dog, an innocent baby, and a secret no one saw coming. This story will take you on an emotional roller coaster from the first moment. Parents Emily and Thomas believe they've created the perfect life for their newborn daughter, Sophie, complete with a gentle family dog, Milo. Yet, beneath the warmth of home-cooked meals and bedtime lullabies, something ominous lurks. When Milo refuses to let Sophie out of his sight, growling at corners and standing guard at her crib, they chalk it up to overprotectiveness. But the dog's unwavering vigilance reveals a shocking truth no one could have predicted. Buckle up for an unforgettable journey. Morning sunlight streamed through the sheer curtains of the living room, warming the polished hardwood floors where Emily Hastings sat with her newborn daughter, Sophie, cradled in her arms. The smell of fresh coffee brewed in the kitchen lingered in the air, mixing with the faint scent of baby powder and laundry detergent. Emily closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the familiar tug of exhaustion. Sleepless nights had become her new normal since Sophie's birth just 6 weeks ago. Thomas, her husband, emerged from the hallway dressed in a crisp button-up shirt, tie slightly askew. He paused to take in the sight of his wife and child, a gentle smile brightening his features. He was due at work in half an hour and was already running late, but he didn't care. The morning ritual of stroking Sophie's downy hair and giving Emily a peck on the cheek was something he cherished. He couldn't bear missing these small, tender moments. They had discussed adopting a dog many times before Sophie's arrival, envisioning the perfect family portrait: mom, dad, baby, and a beloved canine companion. But life had a way of rearranging priorities, and the plan kept getting pushed back. Now, with Emily on maternity leave and longing for an extra source of comfort and security, she and Thomas decided it was finally time. They had visited Redwood Animal Shelter 2 weeks ago. Amid all the barking dogs and anxious eyes, a gentle Labrador mix named Milo had captured their hearts. His calm demeanor and soulful gaze seemed to hold promises of devotion and love. They brought him home that very day. In the short time since then, Milo had already become an integral part of their household. He followed Emily everywhere, shadows dancing across the walls as he trailed her steps, and he would rest his head on her lap whenever she was seated. At night, he often curled up near Sophie's crib, as if standing guard, ears perked for any sign of distress. Emily found his presence comforting, an extra layer of protection and companionship in a period of overwhelming new responsibilities. On that particular morning, Milo was sprawled on the rug by the sofa, his golden brown eyes fixed on Sophie. The baby's tiny fist waved in the air, and Milo's ears twitched attentively. Thomas bent down to ruffle the dog's ears. "You're a good boy, you know that," he said softly, and the dog's tail thumped against the floor in response. A sense of serene normalcy drifted through the home, though it was occasionally punctured by Sophie's whimpers or the chiming of Thomas's phone, reminding him of impending meetings. None of them suspected the storm that would soon disrupt their fragile peace. In that moment, the only thing on their minds was the warmth of a newborn's coo and the gentle loyalty of a faithful dog. Little did they know that Milo's intense fixation on Sophie was no mere quirk but a warning. A week before they officially adopted Milo, Emily and Thomas had strolled through Redwood Animal Shelter's narrow corridors, flanked by chain-link cages on either side. The cacophony of barks and whimpers echoed in the concrete space, yet one dog remained noticeably calm. Milo sat quietly at the back of his kennel, head lowered but eyes alert. The shelter volunteer explained that Milo was found wandering near a busy highway, malnourished and limping. He had no identification chip and no collar. Despite his seemingly rough past, he displayed no aggression or fear, only a quiet watchfulness. His medical evaluations at Greenwood Veterinary Clinic, a well-known clinic in their area, had shown that he was roughly 3 years old, likely part Labrador, and exceptionally healthy aside from minor injuries. There was nothing in his records to indicate the depth of devotion he would soon demonstrate. During the adoption process, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that Milo's calm was almost too good to be true. He behaved like a dog who had seen life's darker side and yet chose to trust again, eyes brimming with quiet acceptance. He didn't jump excitedly or bark at passers-by he only observed. This, oddly enough, made Emily trust him. She felt a kinship with a creature who was cautious yet hopeful. The volunteer had told them that Milo had been overlooked by several potential adopters. People wanted bouncy puppies with bright eyes and boundless energy. Milo was gentle and reserved, and he had scars on his forelegs that hinted at some difficult experiences. Perhaps many adopters found him too unremarkable, but to Emily, his silence was both comforting and intriguing. She felt they had discovered a gem that others had missed. Thomas, too, was drawn to Milo's calm presence. He imagined bringing him home as the perfect family, pet-loyal, mild-tempered, patient. When Milo licked Thomas's hand through the chain-link fence, Thomas looked over at Emily with a smile. It was decided. They completed the paperwork the same afternoon. Back home, Milo seemed to fit in seamlessly. He spent his first days tentatively exploring the living room, sniffing at the baby's bassinet and watching Emily closely as she fed Sophie. If Sophie let out a tiny cry, Milo would immediately trot over, ears pricked in concern. At night, Emily would catch him lying in the hallway, halfway between the bedroom where Sophie slept and the living room couch where Emily sometimes dozed off. It was as if he divided his loyalty equally between mother and child, standing watch to ensure both were safe. In those early days, Emily was deeply moved by Milo's gentle affection. She couldn't help but wonder about his prior life. What had he endured that made him so protective and empathetic? Occasionally, a distant look would cross his eyes, something like longing or remembrance, and Emily wished she could understand the language of dogs, just to ask him about his journey. Yet as the days turned to weeks, Milo's watchfulness shifted from gentle guardianship to almost obsessive vigilance. He would pace back and forth near Sophie's crib, especially when a stranger visited. He barked at the mailman for the first time. He sat stiffly whenever neighbors rang the doorbell, his muscles tense and eyes narrowed. Emily chalked it up to a dog simply adjusting to family life. But the extent of Milo's anxiety around Sophie would soon raise alarms that no one could dismiss so easily. A month after Sophie's birth, Emily realized she needed help. Caring for a newborn was a full-time job, a draining, round-the-clock marathon that often left her feeling isolated and overwhelmed. Thomas offered to take more time off work, but his career had recently taken a pivotal turn, and they both decided it was best for him to continue at the office. Financial stability was crucial, especially now that they had an extra mouth to feed, plus a new furry companion. That was when Mia entered their lives. She was recommended by a neighbor, someone who sang her praises as a dependable babysitter. Mia was in her early 20s, a college student studying early childhood development. Her references checked out. Every family she'd worked for adored her. At the interview, she exuded warmth and a quiet confidence that put Emily at ease. She even brought a small, stuffed toy for Sophie, a pink bunny with oversized ears. Sophie giggled as Mia held her, and Emily felt relief. Maybe she had finally found someone who could give her a much-needed break during the day. From the moment Mia first walked through the door, however, Milo's demeanor shifted. He stood beside Sophie's bouncer, tail rigid, staring at Mia with unblinking focus. When Mia approached to gently pat his head, Milo recoiled, letting out a low, guttural growl that stunned Emily. It was the first time she'd heard him make such a threatening sound. Embarrassed, she apologized profusely. Mia smiled and shrugged it off, saying dogs sometimes needed time to adjust to new people. Yet the tension grew with each visit. Milo refused to leave Sophie's side whenever Mia was in the house. He would follow the young babysitter around, staying just far enough not to be scolded, but close enough to keep an eye on her every move. If Mia tried to feed Sophie a bottle, Milo would stand up on his hind legs to check. If she rocked Sophie to sleep, Milo positioned himself right at her feet. Emily initially assumed it was jealousy. After all, Milo was used to being the primary guardian of Sophie when Emily was busy. Now Mia was stepping into that role, and perhaps Milo felt replaced. But as the days passed, Emily began to notice something unsettling. Sophie, who normally cooed happily in Mia's arms, had started to fuss and cry whenever Milo was near them. At first, that seemed merely a sign that the dog's presence was making the baby anxious. But it could also have been a sign of something else entirely. Sophie was reacting to tension that Emily couldn't see. One afternoon, Mia was changing Sophie's diaper on the fold-out station in the living room. Emily was in the kitchen, preparing tea, while Milo sat in the hallway, ears perked. Suddenly, Sophie let out a shrill cry. Emily rushed to the living room to see what had happened. Mia was hunched over the baby, her hands shaking. She muttered something about a loose diaper pin pricking Sophie's skin. Milo snarled, the hair on his back bristling. Emily gathered Sophie in her arms to soothe her. Mia apologized profusely, explaining it was an accident. Yet something about the scene, the anxiety on Mia's face, Milo's aggression clung to Emily like a cold wind. She couldn't decide if she was overreacting or if there was genuine cause for alarm. Over the next few days, Milo's watchfulness intensified. He followed Sophie and Mia more closely, and his growls became more frequent. Emily found herself torn. Mia seemed so gentle, so nurturing with Sophie when everything was calm, yet Milo's behavior signaled otherwise. Emily tried to push down her unease, rationalizing that dogs sometimes disliked certain individuals for no obvious reason. But deep down, she suspected there was a hidden truth behind Milo's relentless protection. Emily's evenings took on an odd tension she couldn't quite name. She would feed Sophie, bathe her, and rock her to sleep, always under Milo's watchful gaze. Whenever Mia babysat during the day and Emily returned from an errand, she'd find Milo restless, pacing near the crib or blocking the living room doorway as if standing guard. Sophie would be fussy, her cries more plaintive than usual. Mia assured Emily that Sophie was probably just teething, but something about that explanation felt too convenient. Sophie was not yet at the typical age for significant teething pains, and Emily couldn't ignore the knot of worry forming in her gut. Each day, Emily had to decide whether to confront Mia or trust her. Every time she felt close to asking a pointed question, "Is there something going on when I'm not here?" she hesitated. Mia had impeccable references, and Emily feared coming off as paranoid or distrustful. But the mounting evidence was hard to dismiss. Milo's refusal to leave Sophie alone, Sophie's escalating fussiness in Mia's presence, and the strange tension hovering in the house. Thomas picked up on Emily's worry. Late one night, as they lay in bed, listening to the soft hum of Sophie's baby monitor, he asked gently, "Is something bothering you, Em? You seem distant." Emily hesitated, then confided her growing suspicions about Mia. Thomas frowned, but remained pragmatic. "Dogs are sometimes protective," he said, trying to soothe her concerns. "And Sophie's just a baby, maybe it's colic or something else. But if you truly feel uneasy, we can always look into it more." Days went by, and Emily tried to watch more closely. She observed how Mia handled Sophie, how she held her and spoke to her. Mia's voice was always soft and comforting when Emily was within earshot. Yet Milo's distress never wavered. A few times, Emily thought she noticed bruises on Sophie's arms, small and faint. Mia would shrug them off as a result of Sophie's flailing limbs or accidental bumps against the crib railing. Emily remembered that sometimes newborns could bruise easily, but the rational explanation did little to quell her anxiety. The turning point arrived one afternoon when Emily decided to stay home in the next room under the guise of catching up on paperwork, rather than running errands. She wanted to see how Milo and Mia interacted when they didn't know she was watching. Through the small gap of the living room door, she saw Mia rocking Sophie in her arms. Sophie whimpered, and Milo hovered just a few feet away, ears back, tail tucked under. Mia abruptly snapped, "Why won't you stop crying?" Her voice was harsher than Emily had ever heard it. She seemed unaware of Emily's presence. Emily's heart pounded. She took a step forward to intervene, but Mia immediately resumed her gentle cooing, as if flicking a switch. The jarring shift in Mia's demeanor confirmed Emily's fears. Something was off, dangerously so. Milo gave a low bark, a final warning that echoed the unspoken tension in the house. Emily fled to the kitchen, chest tight with panic. Her mind raced with confusion. Mia had impeccable references, a sweet demeanor, and by all accounts was great with children. Yet Milo's continued vigilance and these glimpses of harshness told a different story. Emily felt trapped between her gut instincts and her desire to avoid conflict. But one thing was clear: she couldn't ignore Milo's warnings any longer. The next day, Emily called her best friend, Lauren, who was also a mother. With hushed urgency, Emily shared the details of Milo's strange behavior and the unsettling moments she'd witnessed with Mia. Lauren listened silently, then advised, "Trust your instincts. You know your baby better than anyone else. And Milo dogs sense things we miss. Don't sweep this under the rug." Sitting at the kitchen table, phone cradled between her shoulder and ear, Emily fought back tears of frustration. She was in a predicament no parent wanted to face, suspecting that the person entrusted with their child's care might be harming them. Yet she had no concrete proof. A single snapped sentence and a dog's restlessness were not ironclad evidence. Lauren's suggestion was straightforward: install a nanny cam or some sort of hidden camera to observe what happened in her absence. "It might give you peace of mind," Lauren said, "or at least it'll let you see exactly what's going on." After the call ended, Emily rummaged through the junk drawer, searching for the small camera Thomas had purchased a year ago for home security. It was a discreet device that could be placed on a shelf, camouflaged among books or picture frames. That evening, she confided in Thomas about her plan. He listened, concern etched on his face, and agreed that they needed more information. Neither of them wanted to accuse Mia unjustly, but their priority was Sophie's well-being. They set up the camera late that night, positioning it in the corner of the living room, its lens angled to capture the couch, the coffee table, and the small space where Mia usually tended to Sophie. The camera fed into an app on Emily's phone, allowing her to view a live stream or playback recordings. Once everything was configured, Emily felt both dread and relief. If something was happening, they would finally know. The following day, Emily pretended. She had an errand to run, telling Mia she'd be gone for a couple of hours. Milo was already pacing by the door, sensing Emily's departure. Before stepping out, Emily stroked his ears and whispered, "Watch over Sophie." Milo gave a small whine, his gaze never leaving her. She then said a brief goodbye to Mia, who waved cheerily, cradling Sophie in her arms. Emily parked her car 2 streets away and waited, heart pounding. The baby monitor app was open on her phone, as was the hidden camera feed. For the first half hour, nothing seemed amiss. Mia cooed at Sophie, fed her a bottle, and laid her on the couch to play with soft toys. Milo watched from the floor, tense but silent. Then Sophie started to fuss. Mia's gentle tone vanished. Through the crackly audio, Emily heard Mia mutter irritably, "Stop crying, or I'll give you something to cry about." A chilling statement. Emily's stomach twisted in knots. She kept watching, tears stinging her eyes. Mia's grip on Sophie's arm tightened as she attempted to quiet her. Sophie squirmed, crying harder, and Mia hissed, "Be quiet." Then the unthinkable happened. Mia, in a brief moment of anger, roughly shook Sophie for a second or two before placing her back on the couch. In that instant, Milo sprang into action, growling and snapping at Mia's leg, not enough to bite, but clearly a warning. Sophie wailed, and Mia pulled away, cursing at Milo. The dog placed himself between Mia and the baby, baring his teeth. Emily could see the terror in Mia's eyes as she tried to push Milo aside. But Milo was resolute. He wouldn't let her near Sophie again. Emily felt paralyzed, her mind reeling with a mix of horror and fury. She slammed the car into gear and sped home, ignoring every speed limit sign. Her phone clattered to the passenger seat, the video still playing. She had seen enough. Milo's persistence, his refusal to leave Sophie alone, all of it made sense now. Mia wasn't just a subpar babysitter, she was a threat. Emily's hands shook on the steering wheel as she raced to protect her child, her heart pounding with one grim realization: she might not arrive in time. When Emily burst through the front door, she found Milo standing rigidly in the middle of the living room, body angled protectively in front of the sofa where Sophie lay, whimpering. Mia stood on the far side of the coffee table, her expression a swirl of shock and anger. The tension crackled in the air like static electricity. Emily's gaze darted to Sophie, noting the tear-streaked cheeks and trembling lips. Rage flared in her chest, but she kept her voice as steady as possible. "Mia, step away from my daughter," she said in a low, firm tone she barely recognized as her own. Mia froze, her eyes wide. She stammered a half-baked excuse. I don't know what's wrong with your dog. He attacked me. But Emily was in no mood for explanations. She marched over, lifted Sophie into her arms, and instinctively checked for bruises or any injuries. Sophie clung to her, cheeks stained with tears, soft hiccups escaping her tiny mouth. Milo let out a low growl, directing it at Mia. Emily shot a furious glare at the babysitter, her voice taut with controlled anger. "I saw everything." Mia's face paled. Realization dawned that the harmless dog lady conflict she might have tried to spin was unraveling in front of her. Emily's phone was gripped tightly in her hand. She was one tap away from showing Mia the hidden camera footage. For a heartbeat, the two women stared at each other, the air thick with unspoken accusations and fear. Then, in a burst of bravado or panic, Mia tried to edge toward the front door, her eyes flitting from Emily's phone to the protective dog. Milo bared his teeth, blocking her path. "Call off your dog," Mia pleaded, desperation coloring her voice. Emily's grip on Sophie tightened. "You don't move until I say so." She fumbled for her phone, scrolling to the dial pad. Her vision blurred with tears, but she found the number she needed, 911. Mia's breathing grew ragged, her posture tensed as if ready to bolt. Milo crouched, muscles coiled, as if anticipating her next move. When the dispatcher's voice came through, Emily forced herself to speak calmly. "I need the police at 4630 Maplewood Drive. My babysitter has harmed my child. She's trying to leave." Mia's face contorted in panic. She backed away, heading for the back door instead. Milo lunged in front of her, his nails scraping the floor as he skidded to block the exit. Within minutes, though, it felt like hours, the wail of sirens cut through the quiet suburban street. The flashing lights outside the window cast eerie patterns across the living room walls. Mia made one last attempt to evade capture, darting for the hallway, but Milo intercepted her again, barking furiously. The front door flew open, and 2 police officers rushed in, hands hovering near their holsters. In the chaos of barking, Sophie's crying, and Emily's frantic explanations, they swiftly took stock of the situation. Mia was escorted out in handcuffs, her wild, fearful eyes darting around, as though she still couldn't believe what was happening. Emily stood clutching Sophie, tears streaming down her face. Milo, momentarily unsure if the threat had truly passed, remained at the ready, chest heaving with each ragged breath. It wasn't until the police car pulled away, disappearing into the swirling red and blue lights at the end of the street, that Emily finally collapsed onto the sofa, Sophie in her arms, sobbing with both relief and heartbreak. Milo gently rested his muzzle against her knee, as though reminding her he was still there and that he had been right all along. Once the immediate crisis subsided, the house felt eerily quiet. Thomas rushed home from work, his tie askew and face etched with alarm. Emily recounted the entire ordeal, her voice trembling. She showed him the nanny cam footage, and Thomas watched with mounting horror. "I had no idea," he whispered, his voice thick with guilt. "I should have listened more closely when you were worried." Sophie had finally settled into a fitful sleep in her crib, exhausted by the day's events. A paramedic who arrived with the police had done a preliminary check and assured Emily that Sophie appeared unharmed, except for some mild bruising. Still, Emily decided to take her to Greenwood Pediatric Clinic the next morning for a thorough exam. She cradled Sophie against her chest, kissing the top of her head. Milo lingered by the doorway, his once vigilant stance replaced by weary relief. It was as though he, too, had borne the emotional weight of the day's tension. Emily noticed the slight tremor in his legs and the nervous flick of his ears. She called him over, and Milo approached, tail wagging cautiously, his eyes searching hers for reassurance. Emily laid a gentle hand on his head. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You protected my baby." In the following hours, the phone rang incessantly, neighbors checking on them, the police calling to finalize statements, Lauren wanting updates. The sense of violation and shock was overwhelming. Emily found herself checking every corner of the house, as if expecting another attack. The living room, once a cozy space for reading and baby playtime, now felt tainted by the memory of Mia's rough hands on Sophie and the dog's defensive growls. Thomas stayed up late into the night, going over the camera footage frame by frame. He felt a need to understand exactly how long this had been happening and how he had missed it. Emily sat beside him, tears slipping down her cheeks when they replayed Sophie's pained cries. Their child, so small, so innocent, had been subjected to cruelty they had failed to prevent. Guilt gnawed at them both. They reminded themselves that Milo had been the catalyst for discovering the truth. If not for his unrelenting vigilance, they might never have seen Mia's dark side until it was too late. Emily and Thomas realized they had underestimated the dog's instincts. For all the frustrations they felt at Milo's clinginess and constant growling, it had saved Sophie from further harm. That night, as they climbed into bed, Emily curled against Thomas, her mind filled with nightmares of what could have happened. Milo lay across the threshold of their bedroom door as if standing sentry. If Emily's fear returned, she would only have to look at the dog's outline in the dim glow of the hallway lamp to remember they were not alone, and they were stronger than the evil they had just banished from their home. The next morning, Emily and Thomas took Sophie to Greenwood Pediatric Clinic. Despite a long wait, the staff was kind and understanding once they heard about the babysitter incident. A pediatrician named Dr. Patel conducted a thorough examination of Sophie, checking her vitals, examining her bruises, and observing her reactions to gentle touch. With each question, "Did you notice this bruise yesterday? Has she been feeding normally?" Emily felt a renewed pang of guilt. She realized there had been signs of distress all along, hidden in plain sight. Dr. Patel's verdict was cautiously reassuring. Sophie had a few minor bruises and appeared shaken, but there were no signs of more severe injury. With gentle advice on how to comfort Sophie and watch for any lasting symptoms, Dr. Patel reminded Emily not to blame herself. "You did the right thing by protecting her when you found out," she said kindly, setting a gentle hand on Emily's shoulder. Meanwhile, Thomas coordinated with the local police department. Officer Ramirez, who had been first on the scene the day before, asked them to come down to the station to provide a formal statement and hand over the camera footage. Emily felt a surge of anxiety at the prospect. Giving a statement felt so official, and the idea that their family home was now part of a criminal investigation unsettled her. Still, she was determined to see this through so Mia could be held accountable. Leaving Sophie in the care of Lauren, now the only person Emily trusted wholeheartedly, the couple headed to the police station. A stuffy waiting area led to a stark interrogation room with fluorescent lights that hummed overhead. Officer Ramirez and a detective named Sanders sat across from them, reviewing paperwork and referencing the file. With shaky composure, Emily described every detail, her growing suspicions, Milo's protective behavior, the camera footage. Thomas added context about how they'd hired Mia, her previously glowing references, and the horrifying discovery of her true nature. Their voices trembled when they recounted Sophie's cries, and they struggled to contain their emotions. The officers listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Detective Sanders cleared his throat, his voice carrying a somber tone. "We've checked Mia's record. She has no prior arrests or complaints, which is unusual given what we saw on the footage. We'll be pressing charges for child endangerment and assault." He looked up, sympathy evident in his features. "I'm sorry you had to go through this, but thanks to your dog's behavior, we may have prevented something far worse." Relief washed over. Emily mingled with an undercurrent of lingering fear. Had Mia harmed other children before, without being caught? It was a question that haunted her. The detective promised to investigate MIA's past employment further and urged them to testify in court if necessary. By the time Emily and Thomas left the station, the sun was dipping low in the sky, casting long shadows across the asphalt parking lot. Exhausted but resolute, they leaned against their car, arms wrapped around each other. The road to emotional recovery would be long, but they had taken the first crucial steps. As they drove home, they couldn't help but think of Milo, waiting faithfully at the door, always ready to protect the daughter they loved more than life itself. In the following days, life settled into an uneasy lull. Calls from the police station and social services became routine, peppered with requests for additional information and updates on Sophie's condition. Word spread throughout the neighborhood that Mia had been arrested. A wave of shock rippled among parents who had once relied on her babysitting services. Some approached Emily, voices trembling with relief that their own children had never shown signs of harm, while others were grief-stricken to learn that this young woman they had trusted might have hurt a defenseless infant. Within the Hastings home, a profound sense of gratitude toward Milo permeated the atmosphere. Thomas, who initially had been somewhat neutral about adopting a dog, was now the first to fill Milo's water bowl and sneak him extra treats when Emily wasn't looking. Emily felt a tug of tenderness every time she watched Milo rest his chin gently on Sophie's bassinet, as though standing guard. She realized they had only scratched the surface of understanding the depth of Milo's loyalty. Yet for all the gratitude, a heavy guilt lingered. Emily would find herself awake at odd hours, replaying every moment in her mind. She would stare at Sophie sleeping peacefully in her crib, wondering how many times Mia might have harmed her when Milo wasn't around, or when she herself was too distracted or exhausted to notice. Thomas wrestled with his own remorse, confessing late one night that he wished he'd insisted on a thorough background check rather than relying on neighborly recommendations. In response to these feelings, they poured their energy into rebuilding a sense of safety and stability for Sophie. They bought new locks for the doors, installed a professional security system, and even set up more cameras, this time openly, to discourage any future wrongdoing from visitors or workers. They were determined never to be blindsided again. Friends and family showered them with support. Lauren organized a meal train so Emily wouldn't have to cook during those stressful weeks. Thomas's parents offered to cover any legal expenses or therapy bills if needed. The gestures were kind, but they couldn't completely erase the memory of Mia's betrayal. One afternoon, after feeding Sophie and settling her for a nap, Emily found herself kneeling beside Milo in the living room. She carefully examined the dog's old scars on his forelegs. "You know what it's like, don't you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. She felt an odd kinship with this rescued animal, a being who had suffered but still possessed an enormous capacity for love and protection. Milo turned his warm, brown eyes to her as if he understood every word. Emily believed that from the moment they brought Milo home from Redwood Animal Shelter, some part of him recognized the vulnerability in Sophie, the same vulnerability he might have once felt. And in his own way, he vowed never to let her down. If there was a silver lining to this dark chapter, it was that their bond had strengthened tenfold. They were a family tested by crisis, and in that crucible of fear and guilt, a deep, unbreakable connection had formed. In the weeks that followed, Emily and Thomas devoted themselves to creating a peaceful environment for Sophie's recovery and their own healing. Emily joined a local mothers' support group, where she met other women who shared their stories of childcare mishaps and, in some tragic cases, abuse. She found solace in knowing she wasn't alone. Having a safe space to vent her fears and guilt was a huge step in processing the trauma. Thomas took a closer look at his demanding job, realizing how much he regretted missing key moments during Sophie's first months. He negotiated with his boss to work slightly reduced hours and spend an additional day each week at home. Financially, it was a compromise, but they both agreed it was worth it. Sophie's well-being outweighed any missed income or delayed promotions. They also sought professional help in the form of family counseling, wanting to address the lingering anxiety. The therapist, a warm-faced woman named Rebecca, had a knack for making them feel validated. She praised their swift action and reminded them of the resilience they had demonstrated. "Trauma can sometimes bring families closer," she said gently. "You've shown you can work as a team to protect Sophie. That's powerful." Meanwhile, Milo seemed to sense the shift in the household's energy. His vigilance around Sophie remained, but the edge of constant anxiety softened. No longer did he pace incessantly or growl at every visitor. If a stranger knocked, he would bark, but after a quick assessment, he'd calm down. The family recognized Milo wasn't just a pet. He was a guardian who'd proven his worth beyond measure. During one counseling session, Rebecca asked them how they were coping with the idea of trust, specifically trusting another babysitter or caretaker in the future. Emily's immediate reaction was to shake her head vehemently. The notion of letting anyone else watch. Sophie filled her with dread. Thomas admitted he was more than a little wary as well, but practicality dictated. They might need outside help at some point. Rebecca suggested they consider a childcare center with multiple staff members and transparent oversight. "You might never be comfortable with a one-on-one sitter again," she said, "and that's understandable." Look for an environment where safety checks and supervision are standard. Taking that advice, Emily began researching reputable daycare centers, reading reviews, visiting facilities in person. Each time she felt a pang of apprehension, but she also recognized that healing meant learning to trust again, with caution. She'd never again ignore the instincts of her dog or her own gut feeling. Life wasn't magically perfect. Sophie still woke at night, sometimes crying inconsolably as if haunted by buried memories. Emily found herself unable to sleep, tiptoeing to the crib to ensure Sophie was truly safe. But each day brought small milestones of normalcy, Sophie smiling at Milo, Emily cooking a meal without having to replay the nanny cam footage in her mind, Thomas beaming as he carried Sophie in a baby carrier on a short walk around the block. Bit by bit, they were finding their footing, and at the center of it all, Milo remained a steadfast presence, teaching them through his unwavering loyalty that love and vigilance could coexist, that trust broken could be rebuilt, and that even the darkest nights eventually gave way to dawn. News of Milo's heroism spread through their neighborhood, fueled by word of mouth and a brief article in the Somerset Daily Tribune. The small-town newspaper ran a piece titled "Hero Dog Protects Infant from Harm," featuring a stock photo of a Labrador mix and a few quotes from Officer Ramirez. While Emily and Thomas preferred to keep their family's privacy intact, the gist of the story captured hearts around town. A local animal welfare organization even contacted them about featuring Milo in a campaign to encourage dog adoption, hoping his story would inspire more people to rescue shelter animals. The response from the community was overwhelming. Strangers who recognized them at the grocery store would stop and say, "Is that the dog who saved your baby?" and then gush about how incredible he was. Occasionally, people came bearing dog treats or small tokens of appreciation, a new chew toy, a cozy dog bed, hoping to honor Milo's bravery. At first, Emily felt uncomfortable with the attention, but she soon realized it wasn't just about their private ordeal. Milo had become a symbol of loyalty and protection, a feel-good story that reminded people of the extraordinary bond between humans and dogs. Thomas embraced the positivity, believing it helped overshadow the ugliness of Mia's actions. He wrote a heartfelt note to Redwood Animal Shelter, thanking them for caring for Milo until they could bring him home. The shelter director replied with gratitude, saying they were thrilled to see Milo thriving and even more thrilled to hear how he had protected Sophie. Among their friends, the story prompted many to re-evaluate their own childcare choices. Lauren confided that she had installed a camera in her playroom just for peace of mind. Another friend, struggling to find a trustworthy nanny, opted for a local daycare. While Emily and Thomas never intended to spark widespread paranoia, they believed that a little extra precaution could prevent tragedies. The warmth of community support was most evident one sunny Saturday afternoon when Redwood Animal Shelter organized a small outdoor event at a local park. They invited families and their rescued pets to mingle, share adoption stories, and show off the lovable quirks of their furry friends. Emily and Thomas hesitated to attend, worried that Sophie might be overwhelmed, but ultimately decided it might be therapeutic. At the event, Milo was treated like a celebrity. Children flocked around him, parents patted his head gratefully, and the shelter staff who once cared for him snapped pictures, marveling at how healthy and confident he'd become. Emily and Thomas introduced Sophie to volunteers who squealed at the baby's toothless grin. And though Sophie was too young to understand the significance of it all, her giggles underlined the sense of renewal. In the midst of the crowd, Emily looked at Milo, tail wagging gently, and felt a pang of emotion. Here was a dog once abandoned and alone, now cherished by an entire community, recognized for his instinctive heroism. It dawned on her that Adversity could lead to growth not just on a personal level, but a communal one as well. The darkness Mia brought into their home had been overshadowed by the light of compassion and unity. And for the first time since the incident, Emily felt a glimmer of optimism that life could become beautiful again. Months passed, filled with court dates and continued healing. Mia pleaded guilty, and the legal proceedings wrapped up more quickly than Emily and Thomas had anticipated. They provided their testimony, grateful that the hidden camera footage spoke for itself. The outcome included mandatory counseling for Mia, along with sentencing that reflected the seriousness of the charges. Although the emotional scars for Emily and Thomas would take time to fade, knowing Mia was held accountable helped them sleep a little easier at night. Sophie grew, her once tiny fingers now capable of grasping toys and even tugging at Milo's ears with playful innocence. She babbled often, and her eyes shone with a curiosity about the world. Emily liked to believe that Sophie wouldn't retain any lasting memories of Mia's abuse, but still she kept a protective watch, determined to shield her daughter from future harm. Meanwhile, Milo remained a steadfast pillar in their family dynamic. He was still protective of Sophie, especially around new visitors or in unfamiliar situations, but he had also learned to relax, especially when Emily or Thomas reassured him that things were safe. Late at night, if Sophie stirred, Milo would lift his head, ears pricked, then settle back down when he realized all was well. The Hastings household found a new rhythm. Thomas's schedule allowed him to be home more often, leading to spontaneous family outings, a stroll by the lake, a picnic in the park where Milo bounded alongside the stroller, tail wagging with pure canine joy. Emily felt a burgeoning sense of closure. The fear and tension that once gripped her heart had softened into a deeper empathy and awareness. One crisp autumn evening, Emily stood in the backyard, watching Sophie crawl on a soft blanket. Milo lay beside her, occasionally offering a gentle lick to Sophie's pudgy hand. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. Thomas joined them, placing a warm hand on Emily's shoulder. They watched their daughter and their dog, realizing just how far they had come. The memory of Mia's betrayal lingered, but it no longer defined their daily life. Emily crouched beside Milo, scratching behind his ears and murmuring praise. "You saved our family, you know." She smiled as Sophie giggled in the background, captivated by a falling leaf. Thomas knelt down, wrapping an arm around Emily and ruffling Milo's fur. The dog tilted his head, as if acknowledging the depth of their gratitude. Looking at this tableau, a child, a dog, and two parents who had weathered an unimaginable storm, Emily recognized the profound resilience that had emerged from adversity. They had refused to be broken by betrayal. Instead, they grew closer, fortifying their trust in one another. Through sorrow and fear, they discovered the power of love, the power of vigilance, and the immense capacity for healing. Yes, there would always be shadows in life, and not every stranger was trustworthy. But the love and unity forged in this family had grown roots that went deeper than any darkness. And as Milo lay contentedly by Sophie's side, it was clear that sometimes the greatest protector and teacher could be found where one least expected, in the unspoken loyalty of a rescue dog with a heart of gold. Autumn gave way to winter, and the Hastings family found themselves wrapping the house in tinsel and fairy lights for Sophie's first holiday season. In the months since the nightmare with Mia, life had returned to a steady rhythm, punctuated by Sophie's laughter and Milo's soft tail wags. Each night, Emily and Thomas would watch Milo curl protectively at the foot of Sophie's crib, as though he was still sworn to stand guard against unseen threats. December brought with it an extra layer of magic. Sophie's first birthday. Though she wouldn't remember the celebration, Emily and Thomas wanted to mark this milestone as a triumph over adversity. They invited a small circle of friends and family who had supported them through the difficult months. Lauren helped hang pastel-colored streamers and blow up balloons, while Thomas's parents arrived with homemade cupcakes decorated with tiny paw prints, a playful nod to Milo's heroism. On the morning of the party, an unexpected snowfall dusted the front yard. Delighted, Emily bundled Sophie in a fluffy coat and matching mittens, then stepped outside with Milo by her side. The dog sniffed at the powdery flakes, tail wagging. Sophie squealed in excitement, attempting to grab at the snow. The sight made Emily's heart ache with gratitude. It was a moment of pure joy, untainted by the shadows of the past. Inside, as guests gathered, the living room came alive with chatter and laughter. Thomas busied himself greeting old friends who remarked on how big Sophie had grown. Milo moved among them, accepting gentle pats and ear scratches, occasionally pausing to glance back at Sophie as though to confirm she was safe. The once tense space where Mia's betrayal had come to light was now filled with warmth and love. When it was time for Sophie's cake smash, they placed her in a high chair near the window. The sun cast a golden glow across her rosy cheeks. With gentle encouragement, Sophie patted at the pink frosting, giggling as she painted her chubby fingers in sweet icing. Milo watched intently, nose twitching at the sugary scent. Despite his longing eyes, he remained at a respectful distance until Thomas set down a specially baked dog treat for him. The dog accepted the gift, tail wagging furiously, as though thanking them for remembering his place in the family festivities. When the gathering wound down, gifts lay in a heap on the coffee table, soft toys, board books, and heartfelt cards wishing Sophie a bright future. One larger box, from Lauren, revealed a framed photograph Milo sitting proudly next to Sophie in a field of sunflowers, both bathed in the gentle glow of late afternoon light. The inscription read, "Love protects." Emily felt tears prick at her eyes, recalling how love had indeed shielded them during their darkest chapter. That evening, after everyone left, the house fell silent but for the soft hum of the furnace. Emily and Thomas carried a sleepy Sophie to her crib. Milo followed, settled on the floor, and let out a long, contented sigh. It was, Emily thought, a full-circle moment, a testament to how far they had come. Within these walls, they had discovered pain and betrayal, but also redemption, healing, and an unwavering devotion that transcended even the worst of fears. As Sophie drifted off to sleep with Milo gently guarding her, Emily felt certain that tomorrow would bring new challenges and joys, all of which they would face together, bound by the enduring resilience that family and a faithful dog could provide. Thank you for sharing in this heartfelt journey of courage, resilience, and the deep bond between a family and their devoted dog. In a world filled with uncertainties, Milo's unwavering loyalty proves that our furry friends can sense dangers we sometimes overlook. Emily, Thomas, and Sophie found healing through love, unity, and the power of trust both in each other and in a remarkable dog who refused to give up. If you enjoyed this story, please show your support by liking the video, sharing it with friends and family, and subscribing to the channel. Your engagement helps us continue bringing you stories that inspire and uplift. Remember, real heroes aren't always the ones wearing capes sometimes. They have wagging tails and a heart full of unconditional love. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and treasure the loyal companions who stand by your side through life's most challenging moments.